Good to see you all this morning. I always hate to break up the party. Welcome, welcome. Glad to have all our young folks with us. So there is a great stanza from this poem that I love by Rainer Maria Rilke, where he says this. He says, "I am the rest between two notes which are somehow always in discord." So read that line for a second. I am the rest between two. It's interesting what he's saying, because it's something I think quite radical about the human condition. He's not saying I am two notes that are in discord or conflict. He's saying I am the conflict. I am the discord, the split. To be human is to be fundamentally split, or you could say alienated from ourselves. It's to live with this dissonance as part of who we are. We are not at one with ourselves. And we're the only creatures that are like this. Like, animals do not have this problem. They just are what they are. Your dog doesn't lay awake at night thinking, I wonder what my owner meant when he said I smelled bad. Like, does he really think I smell bad? Do I smell bad? And doesn't he know I have no control over the way that I smell? Like, your dog is just like, smell me, don't smell me, I don't care. Just feed me and take me for a walk, right? They're not self-alienated. Humans are the only creatures that are like this. We have this fundamental self-split or alienation. Kafka said, I am a stranger to myself, and I've always been so. The human condition just involves this self-alienation. And this happens early on in life. It's described by Jacques Lacan. He called it the mirror stage. Usually about age 1, give or take, we see our reflection in the mirror for the first time. And we think to ourselves, hey, that's me. And we realize for the first time, oh, there's a me, like existing in the world and interacting with other people who can see me. And it doesn't have to be like a literal mirror. This happens mostly through relationships. We discover who we are, that we are. But from that moment on, we sort of overly identify with that image that we now realize the whole world can see. And we begin curating this identity that we can project out into the world. And we sort of fall for the illusion that this image is who we really are. And so we begin constructing a kind of fictional self or image of this self, filling it with content we think other people will desire and love. We curate this identity. We say, I'm smart, I'm funny, I'm kind, I'm strong. And from the very get-go, we just kind of fall for our own illusion. And we truly believe this is who we are. We fully identify with the image that we project. And then we shape our whole lives to reinforce that picture, that identity. Everybody does this. It's completely normal and unavoidable. But it causes a split. And here's where the split comes. Anything that doesn't fit with that image we project becomes almost imperceptible for us. We can't see it or even recognize it as real or as happening. Anything that contradicts the image of self we project out there is disavowed. That's a word for it. It's disavowed. It's like it doesn't even register as real. Even parts of the self that are, part of our own lives and actions, our beliefs, things that are part of us, our identity, we embody, we cannot accept them if they would ruin that image that we've created. And so what happens is we become alienated from major aspects of our own being. We disavow parts of the self. We hide from them. And this ends up causing all kinds of problems for us. And so as humans, we embody these contradictions. We're completely oblivious to them, blind to them, although the people around us are not blind to them. I mean, you guys, in a sense, you guys know me much better than I know myself. You know this, right? This is true for everyone. Because these contradictions, the self-alienation, it's not like buried somewhere deep within. It is right there on the surface where other people can see it and interact with it all the time. I can't see it, but you guys can see it in me. And this causes a deep kind of anxiety at the level of identity. And so humans do lay awake at night going, I wonder what my friend meant when she said that thing about me. Does she think I'm like that? Because I am not. And I will prove to her this is who I am. And we kind of end up just telling ourselves constantly that we know who we are when we kind of don't. We tell ourselves we know who we are, but this is actually a lie that alienates us from this fundamental truth that to be human is to be self-alienated, to be a bundle of contradictions, to be, in a sense, strangers to ourselves. And this causes all kinds of tensions that live in our body. Most of them are unconscious, but they weigh on us, and it shapes the way we interact with the world, and it spills out into our relationships and our actions. And the alienation makes itself known one way or another. Or you could say it like this: every disavowed aspect of the self returns as a symptom, causing problems, disrupting relationships, and our emotional and psychological health. The disavowed parts of the self, they slip out as symptoms of our self-alienation. And these can act as like clues that are pointing us to more of our own identity. But this is very, very hard to accept because it messes with the illusion we've created. And it messes with this idea that we actually do know who we are. That started way, way back when we were just babies. The parable of the prodigal son, I think, kind of plays with this idea of human self-alienation, the disavowal of aspects of the self that return as symptoms and disrupt our relationships to God and self and other in the world. It's interesting, Jesus tells this story in response to a critique offered by the Pharisees because he's living in friendship with tax collectors and prostitutes, people who are excluded from the people of God, disavowed. And to answer them, he tells these three parables right in a row: a lost coin, a lost sheep, and lost son. The prodigal son's the last one. It kind of interprets all three. It's about this rebellious child of a wealthy farmer who stands to receive a sizable inheritance, and the son has the gall to ask his father for his inheritance early, which is insulting and hurtful and actually went against rabbinic law. And kind of to the surprise of the listeners, the father does it. Gives the son his inheritance. And we're kind of supposed to wonder, why would the father even entertain that? I mean, surely he must have known his son and anticipated what was going to happen, but he gave it to him anyway. And this is revealing something about the nature of the father, and in the story, the nature of God, right? And what it reveals is that this father isn't worried about the money. He has his eyes on something much deeper, something that has to do with his son's very identity. And so he just gives him the inheritance. And we're told not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. The phrase distant country is actually code for living among the Gentiles. And he just went among the Gentiles and blew every penny. Then a famine came, and he ended up working a job slopping pigs, which confirms he's in Gentile territory, by the way. And at some point, he was just so hungry, he found himself feeling jealous of the pigs. And the turning point comes in verse 17. In the NIV, it says he came to his senses. In Greek, that word is hiatu. It means himself. So literally, it says he came to himself. He had this insight, this moment of self-discovery, self-knowledge, an encounter with this disavowed aspect of his own identity, and he spots his own alienation, his contradiction. He comes to this new sense of himself. And so there's a sense in which in the prodigal son story, like the prodigal is reconciled, before he's reconciled to his family and father, the prodigal is reconciled to this aspect of his own identity that he's been alienated from and estranged, that's disavowed. And this awakens in him a desire to go home. He began to form a plan. He'd go to his father and fall on his knees and admit his error and say, I'm not worthy to be your son, but maybe I could just be one of the hired hands. He's anticipating the father's response, thinking that what he's done is so unforgivable, the best he could ever hope for would just to be a servant or a slave. And there was actually some good reason for this. You know, when a Jewish man squandered a family fortune in this way, all of that wealth was meant to stay within the people of God. And instead it went over to the Gentiles. And so this isn't just a family issue. This is actually a community issue. He has weakened the Jewish people here. And so if he wanted to come home, that community would have something to say about it. When he showed up, they would actually have to decide if they were going to let him back into the community. And if they decided no, they had this ceremony. Actually, it was called a kezazah. It means the cutting off. They would sit him down and take a pottery, and break it right in front of him, as if to say, your brokenness has kind of shattered the bonds of community. So if you live here as an outsider now. And the son probably figured that's what was waiting on him. What he didn't know, though, what he couldn't know, was that at the gate of the family home stood this old man, heartbroken, staring toward the horizon, longing for this lost son to come home, worried sick about how he was surviving the famine, wondering if he was even still alive. And he stood there day after day after day, pacing back and forth, longing, hoping, staring at the horizon, waiting for some sign of movement. I always like to imagine the moment he saw something off in the distance. I wonder how long it took him to recognize his kid. You know how some people have you can tell who they are by the way they walk? I mean, this guy had seen this little boy's first steps. He'd seen every step right up until he walked away. So I wonder, at first, if he just thought it's a shape on the horizon, then maybe it's a neighbor, a messenger, perhaps a traveler. And then at some point, he was like, wait, I know that walk. And it clicked. His shoulders were down and his clothes were in tatters, but this was his son, finally within reach. And we're told while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to his son. The word ran there in Greek isn't the normal word for run. It's actually, it means athletic contest running. So he raced, he sprinted, which, ancient Near Eastern patriarchs did not run. It was the way they dressed. You had to hitch up your cloak and tunic like a dress, and you would bare your legs, which is humiliating to them. Like a slave might run, or an athlete, or a boy. This father should not have run, but that's what it says. He sprinted, he raced toward his broken boy. It was kind of scandalous. Maybe he was worried that if the village got to him first, it would be kezazah, and he'd lose him all over again, so he just ran. He didn't want to risk letting anybody else get to him first. Risking his own humiliation just to show, it says, compassion. And the boy had played the moment out in his mind already. He expected anger. He planned to beg, but before he could even get a word out, the father ran to him and kissed him and held him close like when he was a boy, and embraced him and sobbed for joy. And he slipped his own ring on his finger that identified him as a son. He's saying, I'm claiming you as a son. And he says, I thought you were lost. I'd never get to see you again, but here you are, and you're okay. You've come back to me. And I couldn't be more overjoyed. It's this moment of profound tenderness and love. The father cleans him up, dresses him up, kills the fatted calf, throws a huge party, transgressing, by the way, all the rules about what happens when somebody comes back, and is reconciled to this son that he loves. And his only explanation for it is, I don't know what to tell you, my son was dead, and now he's alive. He was lost, and now he's found. And if the story ended there, it would never offend anyone. And when he was playing a little fast and loose with Jewish custom, but like who doesn't like a good prodigal son return story, right? But that's not the end of the story. In fact, this is where the story really gets intense. He had begun by saying there was a father who had two sons. So this part is about the second son, the dutiful son who followed the rules, who stayed at home and worked for the family. We're told that he was in the fields when this all took place, and on returning home, he heard music and dancing, and he called a servant and said, "What's happening?" And the servant said, "Your younger brother has come back, and your father has welcomed him, so we're celebrating." This was a communal society, you know. Everybody in the area knew when this younger brother had taken off and why. And everyone knew when he had returned. And this whole party would have been a very public event, in part because in those days there were no refrigerators. So if you killed a fatted calf, you eat that baby down to the hooves. So you call all your friends over. Neighbors would have been called to join the celebration, partly as this father's way of declaring, this is still my son. Don't even think about the kezazah. I am rejoicing. You come rejoice with me. By the way, joy is a serious theme in all three of these stories. When the shepherd finds the lost sheep, it says he joyfully put it on his shoulders, calls his friends and says, "Rejoice with me," and then there's rejoicing in heaven. When the woman finds the lost coin, it says that she calls her friends and says, "Rejoice with me," and it's followed by a rejoicing in heaven. And here the lost son returns and the father is rejoicing. The servants are rejoicing. The neighbors are rejoicing. Everyone's rejoicing except this older brother who won't even go into the house. And this, for first listeners, this is very tense. They're all listening to this going, what is this? What is happening? They also would have known that in a party like this, the eldest brother has a very important role. The father would be seated with the other patriarchs in a place of honor, and the older brother would play the host to all the guests. It was a role of hospitality. He would work the room and attend to the guests, and to fail at this act of hospitality would humiliate the family. And this responsibility was taken very seriously. I mean, when you had your eldest son wait on the guests, it was like saying, look, you're so important that our first son waits on you. But the older brother isn't there. Which meant the father had to do it. Another humiliation. In fact, at some point, he has to leave the party and go outside and plead with the older brother to come in. Listeners would have grimaced at this humiliation. When the prodigal left, it was kind of a private humiliation, but the elder brother, he is shaming his father in public here. He's deliberately humiliating him where the whole community can see it. And the father just pleads with him, come into the party. And the text says, but he answered his father, look. It's a respectful way to address his father. What he should have said is, Father, forgive me, but here's my beef. But he omits the title of father. He just goes, look. It's very disrespectful. I mean, if you look at the text, even the prodigal son, when he asks for his inheritance, he begins with the title of respect, Father. The older brother is triggered here. Something's messing with this carefully curated image of himself that he's put out into the world. He's constructed this whole identity around being seen as the good son, the dutiful one who does his part and who earns his father's love, earns his place in this family. He's shaped his entire life around this image of himself. And when this prodigal returns, having shamed the family, and the father embraces him, just lavishly loves and accepts him, the older brother's carefully curated identity just comes crashing down around his ears. And he's enraged. He just loses it. He starts acting out. You could say the symptom has appeared in the story, right? And for the first time, maybe in his life, he refuses to do his duty. It causes rupture in the family. It's just as bad or worse than what the prodigal has done. All these years I've been slaving for you, he says. I've never disobeyed you, and you never gave me so much as a goat so I could celebrate with my friends. Notice that he likens his role to a slave. He is so messed up in his own identity. Is that who he thought he was this whole time? A slave? This resentment he's been trying to keep underwater like a beach ball. It's just like bursting to the surface. He says, when this son of yours, he won't even call him my brother. He's disowned him already. Who squandered your property with prostitutes. By the way, it doesn't say anything about prostitutes. This is the older brother's fantasy, sort of slipping out. Like the prostitute thing isn't so much what the younger brother has done, it's just what the older brother has imagined he is doing, or maybe what he wishes he could do. He's so identified with this image of himself as the good son, and he has resented this for years. And he is convinced that he has earned his father's affection by slaving for him. And then when this happens, this forgiveness from nowhere, he can't handle the contradiction. This lavish acceptance of the prodigal who had bailed on them. It's almost like he has laid awake at night, fuming about his brother's actions, just filled with grievance and fantasizing about what he's been doing. All that resentment just comes spilling out in the form of rage toward the father. That seems actually quite out of character for a guy who built his identity around being the dutiful son. And he ends up in the end doing that exact same thing the brother did. He renounces his responsibilities as a son. He humiliates and insults his father, and he places himself outside the family. And the father pleads with him, my son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And that's where the story ends, with this older brother stuck outside the house, which had to be kind of a bone in the throat of the Pharisees because they knew exactly who he was talking about. Remember, he's telling this story as rationale for why he's hanging out with prostitutes and sinners. It's a bunch of prodigal sons and daughters he's welcoming. It's interesting, scholars believe that this is probably like a common parable that was used in moral teaching at the time. A story that the Pharisees knew well and had probably used as a form of moral teaching, but then the ending Jesus used was all wrong. The prodigal is supposed to be excluded, and the older brother should have been celebrated, but Jesus inverted the ending. The prodigal is included by the father, and the older son is excluded, but not by the father. That's a key point. He excludes himself. He's undone by his own refusal to admit this moment of self-alienation, to admit the way he's just bought into this whole identity, this image of himself. He's so attached to his own piety and captivated by this carefully curated image of himself that he simply cannot accept the contradiction, the insight that in fact he is loved, not because he's earned it, but simply because he's the precious child of a loving father. The extravagant love of the father has just destabilized his identity. Jesus' listeners could surely see the older brother, and they could see what the older brother in the story could not see, that he's a rest between two notes that are always in discord, right? He's a stranger to himself, oblivious to his own charade. And when he's forced to face this, it's just too much. And rather than face his own self-alienation, he becomes excluded by his own kind of self-imposed exile. And this is a crucial detail. It really was self-imposed. The father in this story doesn't exile anyone. Not the prodigal, not the older brother. The father doesn't punish, exclude, or exile any of his children. This is the father's nature. No matter their contradictions, no matter what their mistakes or actions are, the father's children are just loved and accepted. No strings attached. And this is really good news to the prodigal who has embraced his own self-alienation. But this just wrecks the older brother, whose identity is so wrapped up in his carefully curated image as the good son. I mean, in the end, there's a sense in which both sons are very confused about their own identity, but only the prodigal could admit this. And this makes all the difference in the world. And down through the years, this story has kind of been told to reveal what really stands at the heart of Jesus' teaching about God. And especially to his own people who had struggled in exile. And the heart of it is that all exiles are self-imposed. For a long time, my spiritual director was this monk, Father Adam. He used to always tell me that at any given moment, you have the exact relationship with God that you desire. I just hated when he said that to me. It ruined my whole game, you know. God is not the limiting reagent in this chemical reaction. God exiles no one. All exiles are self-imposed. And most of the time, prostitutes are not involved. Most of the time, it's actually religion causing the problem. When religion is used as a way to kind of hide and mask our self-alienation, to reinforce our very carefully curated identity and disavow anyone or anything that threatens this, then religion becomes really dangerous. It's interesting, the word religion, I know I've taught this before, but I love it. It comes from a couple of Latin words, ligare, which means to bind, or ligamentum, which means to bond. So the word religion, the root of it is supposed to be about binding, bonding, religamenting, reconnecting, binding us to each other and to God and to ourselves and to the world. Religion is religamenting, reconnecting the soul. But if religion is co-opted to mask our self-alienation, to reinforce our carefully curated and highly defended identity as good little boys and girls, then the next move is almost always that we'll start excluding anyone who tampers with that illusion. And for the Pharisees, this was the tax collectors and prostitutes. This is the whole reason he's told this story. People who struggle will be rejected because they trigger this awareness of our own struggles that we've tried hard to disavow, and we can't allow that, so we have to exclude them. This is always what's happening when we're excluding. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said this, I'll paraphrase him. He said, essentially, we despise in others only what we despise in ourselves. And if religion becomes a way to exclude people in our lives who are acting like mirrors, who reflect back to us these disavowed aspects of the self that ruin our illusion and threaten our identity, then this must be exposed as a dangerous problem, religion as a problem. And this is exactly what Jesus is doing in this story. He ruins the illusion, man. He holds up the mirror. And in doing so, he invited them and all of us really to try and recognize our own self-alienation and the games that we play to try to protect our identity. Every disavowed aspect of the self returns as a symptom. And God just refuses to be party to that illusion. God is our acceptance, not our exile. God won't stand for the exclusion of God's children, not on the basis of failure and brokenness and struggle, not even for refusing to join the party. God is our acceptance, not our exile. The only exiles are self-imposed. And the scandal of the story really is that God doesn't really seem to care all that much about how we're messing things up at any given time. I mean, how else are we going to learn who we are and what it means to be human, but to try and then to fail, and then try again and fail better? God just loves prodigals and dutiful sons alike. And the invitation is the same to both of them. I am always with you, and everything I have is yours. Which, if you think about it, is kind of a scary thing to believe. Because that means that the problem, is not out there somewhere that I can blame and disavow. It's in here. And yet we're invited to come home to a family of love and forgiveness and reconciliation, to be part of a family that actually requires very little. One really difficult thing, which is a willingness to admit our own self-alienation and to offer hospitality to the disavowed aspects of our own identities and others as well. And there's a sense in which to accept our own acceptance is really scary because it messes with our identity, all the work we've done to feel right and righteous and good. But in the end, this is not a story about how God is promising to fix our self-alienation, to solve our contradictions. It's not what happens. It's what Rilke was saying. To be human is not to have conflicts. To be human is to be a conflict. This is never going away. And God knows this. And God's choice is to use this, to run toward it, even self-humiliatingly run toward it, and use it to help us change and grow and finally find home and find our own identity. And this is a story at its heart about how God has decided to use our brokenness, our self-alienation and contradictions to bind us together to each other, to religament, religion us to God and self and other in the world. And if we'll make space for this to happen, then we'll begin to come to a deeper knowledge of ourselves slowly over time. One that includes all of the millions of ways in which we still don't know who we are. All the ways we're strangers to ourselves. And this can either split us apart and make us disavow each other, or this can draw us together and make us one family. But it takes this major leap. We have to dare to believe the promise of the Father. I am always with you. Everything I have is yours. You don't have to earn it or achieve it. And in truth, you never could. Because as the poet said, I am a rest between two notes that are always in discord. I am a bundle of contradictions. I am alienated from myself and so afraid of seeing what I'm trying not to see and feeling what I'm trying not to feel and knowing what I'm trying not to know about myself. And this is the radical promise of the story. God says, this is not a problem. This is how we figure it out together as part of this family. It doesn't punish each other for this. And so his invitation in the end is, don't you want to come in to the party? And this is what we're invited to do, to be part of the family of God. Let's pray. Oh God, and thank you for this story. And thank you that we don't have to hide the prodigal son and daughter living inside each of us. And we're so thankful, God, that through Christ you've started this new family of love and acceptance. And I pray that we would be brave to out ourselves and just admit our own self-alienation and the way we're strangers to ourselves. I pray that redemption will always be a place where we love and accept each other as we are and where we don't make each other pay for our brokenness.